angels waging war in the unseen realm. Global events fulfilling biblical prophecy. Eternal life. What lies beyond mortality? From analyzing the paranormal from a biblical worldview to the discussion of cutting-edge science and technology, conspiracy, discovery, special investigative reports. Unafraid to explore the challenging issues facing humanity. Welcome to another edition of SkyWatchTV.
One of the difficult aspects of the Old Testament, even for believers, is understanding why God ordered the Israelites during the conquest of Canaan to wipe out every living thing among certain communities. Welcome to SkyWatch TV. I'm Derek Gilbert. Joining me in studio, the host of SkyWatch Women, my wife and best friend, Sharon Gilbert.
Hi.
And the author of a book that seeks to help us understand the mindset, the worldview of those who actually wrote the Bible. He's the scholar in residence for Logos Bible Software and the author of The Unseen Realm, Reclaiming the Supernatural Worldview of the Bible, Dr. Michael Heiser. Mike, the conquest of Canaan, is Yahweh, the God of the Old Testament, just a genocidal maniac as skeptics will claim?
Yeah. That description always suggests that it's indiscriminate. There's no sort of rationale for this.
Caprice.
God wakes up one day, he's bored, so who do I kill?
Yeah.
Why not? Let's just kill more than I did yesterday. All these caricatures, again, of God, very convenient. What I'm trying to do in Unseen Realm, I spent a few chapters on this, 3 chapters, on the whole concept of, cherem, which is, holy war, but cherem means to devote something to destruction. In other words, it's a specific judgment passed by God on a particular place. What I'm trying to do is show people that, hey, novel idea here. There might have been a theological rationale for why these commands were given, and there might be an actual context for the wars of conquest when it relates to this stuff. And lo and behold, there is. If you actually look at the conquest account, it's not just killing. There are actually 4 or 5 different verbs used for the conquest. In other words, Israel, this is what you're supposed to do. There's dispossess, there's drive out, there's expel. In other words, there's non-killing terminology. Mm-hmm. Now, the killing terminology, haram, again, to devote something to destruction, if you actually look where that term is used, it's used not very frequently, and other verbs of killing, again, very infrequent, and they all happen to be used in the same places, in the same episodes in the account. And that place is the hill country. And you say, well, who cares?
So when you say
about
same
the hill
places,
country?
You're not talking about the text. You're talking about, you can take a map
Right.
of ancient Canaan and say, these are the tribes that Joshua was told to go in and...
Right. Here the account tells us they went to this place, this region, this location, this city, and of course telling you where the city is located. And this is where cherem happened. Okay, and if you actually, again, plot those out, and then you overlay that with where were the Anakim spotted in the land when the spies went in to reconnoiter the land. Guess what? They overlap. This is why, again, if you think about the conquest as including Moses and Joshua, you go back into the book of Numbers and book of Deuteronomy. The conquest of the territory that God wanted to give to his people actually begins and ends with giants, with the giant clans. In the case of Moses and Joshua, remember they go up the other side of Jordan, and God actually tells Moses, look, you don't have to worry about what's going on in Edom or Ammon, because the descendants of Esau already took care of the Amim and the Zamzumim, and these were the descendants of the Anakim, great and tall people like the Anakim. And the Anakim, Numbers 13:33, are from the Nephilim. So God's saying, look, you don't have to worry about this, but there's still some of them left way up here in Bashan. And that's where he sends Moses. They go to confront Sihon and Og, the king of Bashan, the Amorite kings. Amorite, the book of Amos, chapter 2, says the Amorites, were as tall as cedars. It's the same thing. So that's where the conquest begins. And then, of course, they wind up getting into Canaan under Joshua. And then you have the Harem command, the killing commands, wherever they occur, are in these places where the spies earlier had said, hey, we saw the Anakim in the land, that's why we're scared, we can't do it, and that's why we get the 40 years of wandering. At the end of the conquest, how does Joshua define victory? In Joshua 11, quote, there are no more Anakim in the land.
Yes, yes.
So from beginning, during, and after, the annihilation is not indiscriminate. God's not saying, I want you to go in there and kill everybody that you run into. What's happening here is they're targeting certain bloodlines, certain groups. And in what they're thinking is, look, these guys, these unusual people, they are descended from something really bad, what happened in Genesis 6:1 through 4, which again, if you go back into the whole theological thinking of the Israelite, these people are here to prevent Yahweh's children from having their possession, and if possible, to exterminate Yahweh's own children. So you have the gods versus God.
Can I ask you a question about that really quickly? In Genesis 6, was that the actual reason? Was it to pollute the bloodline so the Messiah could not be born, or was it more than that?
I actually tend to think that that's not the reason, but it was a result. In other words, it's sort of a residual effect. Because you never read in Genesis or intertestamental literature that, hey, the reason they're doing this is to cut off this messianic promise and whatnot, but had it gone unchecked, that would have been the result anyway. So if you're looking at it from God's perspective, which sort of counts, then you look back on this, and we have to intervene here. We have to preserve Noah. We have to get to the other side of the flood. We got to do this, that, and the other thing, because he again has this plan in his head, whereas maybe the writer doesn't know the whole picture, the reader doesn't know the whole picture, that sort of thing. So that would have been a problem. Okay, it would have been a problem.
So the Anakim were descended, or was there another incursion?
This is the whole question of how do you get, Anakim after the flood and all that. There's basically three possibilities for that. I didn't invent these. This is an old question, as you can imagine. So one view actually does include Noah and say, no, not Noah himself, but maybe not his sons, maybe their wives, or something's going on there, so you can sort of have Noah's line okay, but not okay, that kind of thing. So there were ancient writers who would actually take that view because they're asking the same question. How does this work? There's even one text that has Noah himself as a giant, so what that tells you is that they're thinking about the problem and they're writing stuff about it.
There are some programs that will just run with that and say he's from another planet.
So we all know what that is.
We don't need to name it.
So you get that. The other possibility is that the flood was not a global event like we think of it, because the world to the ancient person was Genesis 10.
Right.
Australia's not on the list, North America's not on the list. Well, the world to them is this, Mediterranean, Middle East kind of thing. And so maybe it was regional, maybe some of them survived. And the way you get that is the Philistines, to be honest with you, because the Philistines are said by Jeremiah to come from Caphtor, one of the sea peoples in ancient Egyptian texts. And the Philistines are also named in Egyptian texts, the Peliset, okay? So maybe they, since they're sea peoples, maybe you get some later. Okay? The third view is that in Genesis 6:4, where it says the Nephilim were upon the earth in those days and also after, and then most translations have when the sons of God came into the daughters of men. But you can actually translate that grammatically whenever.
Oh.
Okay, the sons of God came into the daughters of men. So that it doesn't state that there were other events, but it leaves the door open.
That's a huge difference.
Now here's the other factor. I think in Paul's mind, that was a possibility. I don't think Paul stated it, because if you go to 1 Corinthians 11, and again, the whole head covering issue is, people want to get into that.
Because of those who watch,
Right, because of the angels.
Right.
And so, again, we don't have the time. It would take a whole hour to go through what's really going on in the head covering passage, and it's very sexual in nature because of, again, the Greco-Roman terminology. The terminology Paul uses there comes out of Greco-Roman medical texts. And it has something to do with fertility and fecundity. Surprise, surprise, Genesis 6.
Right.
So the advice he gives there, does have to do with modesty, but then he throws in this little line, well, we want to be careful about this because of the angels. So what it tells you is that, at least in Paul's mind, we really don't want this to happen again. So that tells you that maybe he was thinking it could.
Yeah.
So it gives you a little insight into what he's thinking that goes back to this question.
Interesting.
Yeah, it is
Interesting. So what is the full context of the word harem? I mean, English is not a very precise language when it comes to understanding some of the nuances of the Hebrew. What does harem mean? Why would God tell Joshua, don't leave any of their animals alive?
Yeah. Harem was a term that you could use of people, animals, even inanimate objects. Okay, the whole episode with Achan. Okay, the sin of Achan, taking the things out of the tent and burying. All of that stuff was harem. It was devoted to destruction or devoted to God. Now, they could destroy, inanimate objects. They could burn them, for instance. But the larger idea was that I am taking dominion over these things. And as the creator, as the owner, and as God, okay, I'm going to determine what to do with them. We will not use these things to bring, some other kind of sacrifice, if it was an animal. Okay, we are not going to allow you to intermarry with these people because of this bloodline thing going on. These inanimate objects, either we keep them isolated from the other sacred objects, or we're going to destroy them. In other words, God asserts his dominion and ownership, his right to essentially say life or death, on this particular object that's named. So it was, in that sense, kind of an object of you could use the term worship in the sense that we are giving this over to God. We are not assuming any right to ownership or any right to make a decision about this thing. This is God's domain. We're staying out of it, because that's what God wants done. There's no latitude here. So it was something totally dedicated, totally given over to what God wanted to do with something, his verdict.
Inanimate objects, could that also apply to land, geography?
Yeah. You had, again, once the land was, quote unquote, purified. In other words, you get rid of the problem of these bloodlines who want to exterminate you. In other words, you're fine if you drive out the other people, okay, because this is the land I'm giving you. You don't have to kill them, but this is a different matter because of why they exist. So this needs to be taken care of, and until it is, then that land has not been brought under dominion. It's an incomplete conquest, that idea. So, you go into these regions, these cities, whatever, and this is the logic, the theological logic of why God is dictating this. It's not indiscriminate. It's not random. It's not, hateful. It's life or death. I like to say it this way, to an atheist, look, now you're telling me how horrible it is to worship a God who would do this in any regard. Okay, well, I think you're a hypocrite, and here's why. I want to sit with you in your room, in your child's bedroom, and I want to hear you tell your child that, look, if an intruder comes in, if a burglar comes in, I just want you to know that mommy and daddy won't do everything possible to protect you. Okay, we won't. If this person's going to kill you, we won't even kill them. We can't do that, and we're sorry.
Bad. Yeah.
Okay. No, I told my kids, look, if it ever comes to anything like that, I will do everything in my power to protect you, because your life takes precedent over theirs. So I want to hear the atheist either lie to his kids or give the kids that message, okay, that you're not this important to me. And I think they're hypocrites.
That's brilliant.
That raises another interesting question that we'll address on the other side of a break, which is if these other cultures, clans, were, in a matter of speaking, coming into the tents of the Israelites and intending them harm, why were they doing it? Was there something directing them in part of this theological war for the Holy Land? Our conversation with Dr. Michael Heiser about his book, The Unseen Realm, continues right after this on SkyWatch TV. Finally, a book that helps you make sense of the hard-to-understand parts of the Bible. SkyWatch TV is proud to offer The Unseen Realm by ancient language and Bible scholar Dr. Michael S. Heiser. He takes you into the world of the men who wrote the Bible under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, and by understanding their worldview, you will better understand some of the weird parts of the Bible. Like, why was it so important to mention giants in the Old Testament? And why did Peter and Jude reference the angels who created them in the New Testament? The supernatural war between God and fallen angels is real. The Unseen Realm helps you understand the way the apostles and prophets saw that war. And when you order The Unseen Realm from SkyWatch TV, we will add these 2 books free. The Supernatural Worldview by Chris Putnam and G.H. Pember's classic Earth's Earliest Ages. Order The Unseen Realm now by calling the number on your screen or log on to skywatchtvstore.com. Welcome back to SkyWatch TV. I'm Derek Gilbert. The conversation with Dr. Heiser is fascinating, but we've got even more Heiser for you. Check out the exclusive web-only content at skywatchtv.com. More interviews that we can't fit into our network television schedule, and then special programs you will only see on the web and at the SkyWatch TV channels on Roku and YouTube. Programs such as Skywatch Women, our weekly science program, Sci-Friday.
Sci-Friday, yes.
Into the Multiverse with Josh Peck.
Don't watch that one.
That will make your head explode. And daily news updates as well. All of that you'll see at skywatchtv.com. Mike, you made a really interesting illustration of the reason that God, Yahweh, had for ordering or dedicating to destruction these bloodlines, these giant bloodlines, the Anakim, Rephaim, Nephilim in the Old Testament. Why were they seeking to do harm to the Hebrews? Was there a cosmological tug of war, power struggle taking place in ancient Canaan?
Yeah, I think when you get, especially after Babel, you sort of have, we've talked a little bit before in other episodes of Skywatch about how, an Israelite would have been thinking the world is the way it is because of the fall, because of what happens in Genesis 6, and then what happens at Babel, when the nations are punished by God for disobedience at Babel and assigned to, the sons of God, lesser gods, lesser divine beings that in the beginning, God would assign them roles. I'm not going to have a direct relationship with the nations. I'm going to go make my own Israel over here in Genesis 12, right after Babel. But that relationship deteriorates, we're told in Psalm 82. They become corrupt. They don't rule the nations according to the good laws of the true God. They manipulate them. They abuse them. All of that sort of is a maelstrom, kind of a maelstrom of events, where now when you get into the conquest, you have this territorial domain situation in place, and you've got that level of rebellion, but now you've got, again, descendants, from the Nephilim as part of the picture. And so it sort of marries the two. It marries this bloodline thing with the territorial dominion, and now when Israel comes tromping through these other territories, it becomes an us or them kind of thing. So it has degenerated to the point where God knows that, look, these particular people, okay, they were raised up by rival gods, sons of God, rival divine beings, who they're hostile to me and to you, naturally, because you're mine. And so they're superior in terms of who they are and their military might and all this sort of thing. They are the number one threat here. They really can. It is within their grasp to exterminate you. And so this must be taken care of. And it just sort of degenerates from that point on. It becomes a war not just of expulsion. Because when it comes to, again, there's more than one verb, for the conquest. It's not just killing. You can drive a bunch of them out, and we're okay with that. But when it comes to these, you can't let them remain because they will be back. And if you think about it, when Joshua defines the end of the conquest as saying, hey, there's no more Anakim in the land, he adds the little phrase, well, those that are left ran off into the cities of Gath and Ashdod.
And of course, Gath is where Goliath.
That's where we get
exactly.
Goliath.
Yeah.
Okay?
Exactly.
So in other words, these are the 5 cities of the Philistines. He mentions a few of them there, and that's where you pick it up again. Now, granted, you're not going to have one guy, exterminate Israel, but it's the idea of, okay, this is a task that is incomplete, and frankly, if he kills David, I mean, let's think about that.
Yeah.
No Messiah.
Because, well, we have this, again, in the mind of God, okay, we don't have King David yet, we don't have the Davidic covenant yet and all that stuff, but again, in the mind of God, this is the man after God's own heart. And so it becomes, it really ups the ante in terms of the theological level of what's at stake in this confrontation. And lo and behold, it just happens to be with one of these descendants. Again, that's deliberate. So that what I try to get people to realize is that these aren't just random stories put together randomly, placed in the Bible randomly. There's an intelligence that goes into them. There are plots and subplots that run through all the way back to Genesis. These are actually just continuations of something else. And the biblical writers expect you to get that. They expect you to know that. And often it escapes us, but they're there for a reason, and they're there to perpetuate an idea. And again, the theological messaging is really significant.
Well, let me ask you a question. And it just occurred to me, I don't know why I never thought of this before. Why didn't God just go in and wipe them out?
All of them
He could have
himself.
done it in a snap.
Yeah, well, he could have.
Why leave it to Israel to do it?
I think this is a pattern with God that occurs both in the supernatural world and the world of men, the world of humanity. And that is, God creates intelligent beings who are like him. They share his, the theological term is communicable attributes. Humans have communicable attributes without. Well, that's nice, but so do divine beings. This is why you get the plural language in Genesis 6, or not Genesis 6, Genesis 1:26. Let us create humankind in our image. And then when the creation happens, it's only God doing the creating, but he's speaking to the audience. And who's the audience? Well, it's the sons of God, Job 38. They were
Divine
there when,
counsel.
Yeah, they
Yes.
divine counsel. They were there when this whole thing was happening. So God creates intelligent beings, and yeah, he could do that. But the pattern with God is he likes to have the beings who are like him participate with him in doing things. We have divine council meetings in 1 Kings 22, where God allows the members of the spirit beings there decide, okay, how do we get rid of Ahab? Okay. In Daniel 4, the decree, the Nebuchadnezzar's dream. It says in the text, this is by decree of the watchers,
Yes.
plural.
Yes.
Yes.
And it also says it's by decree of the Most High, so it's a joint decision. Daniel 7, the court sat, the council sat, and judgment is rendered on the four beasts. Okay, it's just a pattern. God likes to have the intelligent beings, his family members, so to speak, divine or human, do things with him and for him, participate in the decision, to participate in how history is propelled. So I look at this as just another one of these examples that, I'm not going to do everything for you. I want you to do it with me. I'm going to cooperate with you. I'm going to fight for you. But you are part of this. You're not just sort of a stage actor and I'm going to do something and now you just reap the benefit. You are part of the story, really. And so you have to play your part.
That's incredible.
Yeah. I want to come back to Psalm 82 here and just see if I can summarize this. After the Tower of Babel event, God delegated his 70 sons, the B'nai Elohim, as judges, rulers over the different nations that he divided. Divided the nations, counted them according to the number of the sons of God.
Yep, Deuteronomy 32:8.
Right. And then for whatever reason, some or all of these decided to set themselves up as gods themselves, got a little taste of power, liked it, and decided that they were going to rule not as God's agents, but instead of God.
Yeah, rivals. Yeah.
Psalm 82 then, is that the scene where God calls them back together and says, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, in the beginning, again, the famous first verse, God stands in the divine council in the midst of the Elohim, midst of the gods, he passes judgment. Then verses 2 through 5 is, why am I angry? And again, it's this whole kind of a courtroom scene where he's angry because of the way they've dealt with people. Okay? Paul has this interesting comment in Acts 17, part of the Mars Hill thing, where he refers back to the fixing of the boundaries. Again, it's back to the Deuteronomy 32, the Babel event. And in Paul's mind, again, he senses that, he actually says that God did this so that someday, people might, recognize who he was and be brought back into faith and all this kind of stuff. So it has a redemptive purpose. That's why Israel was supposed to be a kingdom of priests. You live a certain way, you're going to attract the nations back to me. They're going to voluntarily come back. And I actually think that's part of the problem, because instead of Israel trying to attract the nations back through, the Abrahamic covenant, through you all nations of the earth will be blessed, I think the gods of the nations see this as part of the plan. It's like, no. They're ours now, and we're not giving them back. And you get this rivalry situation going on, and you get abuse. And
Yeah.
by the end of the psalm, because he says, look, all of you are sons of God. All of you are sons of the Most High. You're all Elohim, but you're going to die like men. And then the last verse, the psalmist says, rise up, O God, and take back the nations. Take the nations. So he wants this to happen. But it's an eschatological feel to it. It's actually part of a bigger theme in biblical theology that scholars refer to as the death of the gods.
Death of the gods.
Right. In other words, when the other gods finally get what's coming to them.
Yeah.
Now, in biblical theology, it's always associated with the day of the Lord, or themes like resurrection, tribulation, Messiah, all these sorts of things. Because, again, if you look at the New Testament, and I'm a big proponent of, and again, this isn't unique to me, but already but not yet eschatology. Things have been initiated and launched, and they're in process, and then they're going to have a consummation. And you get this tribulation, day of the Lord language all the way through, and not coincidentally, it coincides with the beginning of the body of Christ, the church, the quote-unquote New Israel, where now we have the people of God here, and the gates of hell will not be able to, withstand it. So as the church grows, incrementally, the powers, the principalities and powers, geographical terms, geographical rulership terms, thrones, dominions, this is the language Paul uses, they lose their turf. Okay? It's a progressive losing to them that's going to culminate, again, in things like the scenes we see in the book of Revelation and elsewhere. But this is actually part, what you read in Revelation is part of a whole complex of ideas that goes back to this desire to see the gods judged.
We just got about a minute left here, but something occurred to me. In fact, we taled about it in our weekly Bible study this past week.
One of our many Heiser moments?
Yes. It's like we ring the bell every week for the Mike Heiser reference. The parable Jesus gave of the ruler who goes away to foreign land and the wine press, and he sends his servants back to, and the tenants beat him up, and then they kill one, and then he sends his son, and they kill him.
Isn't it interesting, the tenant language there?
Yeah, so essentially, because I had always thought, well, this is talking about the Israelites beating up and killing the prophets, but is there a deeper meaning there?
Yeah, I think there is, because the day of the Lord, the resolution of the exile, the end of the tribulation, and the coming of Messiah, of course, in our context, it's the second coming. They not only include all 12 tribes. Okay, this is from Hosea chapter 2, Hosea 1 and 2. It includes Gentiles as well. This is why Paul, when he quotes Hosea chapter 2 about, my people, not my people, and all that, Paul swaps in the Gentiles for the lost tribes, because in Hosea 1, he's included the Gentiles in that vision. That whole, this is what's going to happen. So when you go to a parable like that, you have to view it against the larger picture of Old Testament theology. The Gentile nations are always part of this regathering thing. It's not only Jews. This is what Paul refers to as the fullness of the Gentiles. Well, when the fullness of the Gentiles happens, then then we'll go back to Israel, and all Israel will be saved.
We're going to have to stop. We're out of time.
Yeah, fascinating discussion, but the conversation will continue in the exclusive web-only content at SkyWatchTV.com with Sharon Gilbert, and for Dr. Michael Heiser. We thank you for watching as we keep watch. This is SkyWatch TV.